I didn't expect anything unusual that evening. It was just dinner. Just another meal after a long workday. But sometimes, life has a strange way of setting you up for a fall without you even realizing it. That night, it wasn't the food or the setting that would leave an impression on me. No, it was her words, just one sentence. A single, simple sentence that broke everything. It all started when I walked into the apartment, still wearing my coat from the office. The lights were dim, as always. Clara loved the ambience in the evenings. She said it made everything feel warmer, more intimate. The kitchen smelled like fresh garlic and onions, a familiar scent, one that reminded me of lazy weekends spent making pasta together. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and took off my shoes, hearing the soft hum of the refrigerator as I walked toward the kitchen. But then I froze. Clara wasn't standing at the stove like she usually did when dinner was ready. Instead, she was sitting at the table, already halfway through her meal. "You're late," she said without looking up, cutting a piece of chicken with methodical precision. I glanced at the clock. It was 7:15. It wasn't late by any standard, especially considering she knew how packed my day had been. I shrugged it off, hanging my coat on the hook and walking over to the fridge to grab a beer. "Sorry, traffic," I mumbled, popping the cap and leaning against the counter. She nodded but didn't reply. There was something in the air, something I couldn't quite pinpoint. She wasn't angry. No, it wasn't that. It was the silence. It was thick, like the kind of silence that fills the space between two people who are no longer really there together. I sat down across from her, and for a few minutes, we ate in silence. I tried to make small talk, asking how her day had gone, what her clients were saying, but she only gave me short answers. I could tell she wasn't fully present. I don't know why it bothered me so much, but it did. It was as though she was physically there, but emotionally miles away. "Clara," I said finally, setting my fork down. "Is everything okay?" She didn't look up from her plate. Her eyes were focused on the food in front of her, but I could see her jaw tighten slightly. "Yeah, why?" I hesitated. It was a simple question, but it wasn't a simple answer. There were cracks, I could feel them. They had been forming for weeks, maybe months. Little things, like how she'd start a conversation and then abruptly change the subject, how she'd be gone for hours, leaving me with nothing but unanswered texts. I never asked her about them. I never pressed. But tonight, for some reason, I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was fine. "Clara, you've been different lately," I said carefully, watching her face as I spoke. "Are we okay?" She finally looked up. Her eyes met mine, and there was something in them, something I hadn't seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't guilt. It was just emptiness, a kind of resigned indifference that sent a chill through me. "We're fine," she said flatly, taking another bite of her food. But it wasn't the words that struck me. It was the way she said them, like she had rehearsed them, like it didn't matter whether we were fine or not because she had already made up her mind about something. I tried to push the thought away. Maybe I was just overthinking things, but I knew something wasn't right. I could feel it. As we continued eating, I tried to distract myself with the wine, the food, the hum of the refrigerator, anything that would make the tension between us less noticeable. But it didn't help. Every time I looked up, I saw Clara, sitting there, calm and composed, but it wasn't her that I was seeing. It was the distance, the space between us that had grown so wide, so fast, that I was suffocating. It was then that she said it. One sentence, just one sentence, and everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my world, was flipped upside down. "I'm in love with someone else." It was as though the floor fell out beneath me. I felt lightheaded, dizzy, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. The room spun, and I heard a distant ringing in my ears. It was like everything had frozen in time. Clara said it so matter-of-factly, like she was talking about the weather, like she was telling me what kind of shoes she was planning to wear the next day. No emotion, no hesitation, just a simple, cold declaration. I didn't know how to react. My mind raced, but nothing came out. I just sat there, staring at her, unable to speak, unable to understand what was happening. You're what?" I finally managed to stammer. My heart was racing now, pounding in my chest. My palms were sweating, and I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pushed her plate away from her and folded her hands in front of her. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. But it's been going on for a while now, and I don't think I can keep pretending anymore." I felt like I was suffocating. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. My whole body was numb, but my brain was working overtime, processing the words she had just said, trying to understand them, trying to find a way to make sense of it. But nothing made sense. I felt like I was falling into a black hole. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was telling me that she was in love with someone else. And there was no warning, no signs, no obvious clues. It was like she had been living a double life right under my nose, and I had been too blind to see it. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out the door. I didn't even look back. I didn't look back when I left. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to. As I stepped out the door, the cold air hit me like a slap in the face, but it didn't wake me up. If anything, it made everything feel even more surreal. I thought I was going to pass out. My body moved mechanically, like I was no longer in control. I walked down the stairs of our building, my hands in my pockets, not because I needed warmth, but because I didn't know what else to do with them. I didn't know where I was going, but I kept walking. There was a part of me that thought I was still dreaming. This couldn't be real, could it? She couldn't have just said that. She couldn't have dropped that bomb on me with no warning. There had to be some mistake, some explanation. Maybe it was a joke. A cruel joke, sure, but maybe that's all it was. But no, deep down I knew better. There was no denying it. The way she said it, the way she didn't even flinch after delivering the blow, it was real. Clara, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, the woman I had shared my life with for the last 7 years, was telling me that she was in love with someone else. And somehow, I had missed it. I had missed everything. I kept walking. My feet led me down streets I didn't even recognize. It wasn't until I found myself at the corner of a park, sitting on a bench under the harsh glow of a street lamp, that I finally stopped moving. The cold wind was starting to sting my face, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. My mind was too busy replaying her words over and over again. I'm in love with someone else. How could she have done this to me? I couldn't wrap my head around it. We had plans. We had dreams. We were supposed to grow old together. And now it was all gone. Just like that. As if I had never mattered. But I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't just walk away without answers. I had to know. I needed to know everything. Who was this person? How long had this been going on? Was I that blind? Was I really that naive? And just as I was about to stand up and walk back home, I heard my phone buzz in my pocket. It was a text from Clara. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. That was it. No explanation. No apology for what she had done. Just those words. I stared at the screen, the message feeling like a slap all over again. Was this her way of saying she was sorry? Sorry for what? For the betrayal? For breaking me in ways I didn't even know were possible? I felt my heart race, and my hands started to shake. I couldn't stay here anymore. I couldn't just sit in the cold, waiting for the pieces to fall into place. I had to do something. I had to confront her. But what was I going to say? What could I possibly say after she had already destroyed everything? I didn't respond to her message. I couldn't. It felt wrong. Instead, I stood up, turned on my heel, and started walking again. This time, I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't care. I was numb, completely numb. The next few hours were a blur. I wandered the streets, trying to make sense of the night, but nothing made sense. Nothing at all. The one thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't go back home. Not yet. Not until I figured out what to do next. Until I had some semblance of clarity. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and kept walking, not knowing where I was going, but knowing one thing for certain. My life was never going to be the same again. I don't know how long I had been walking. Hours, maybe. It felt like I had lost all sense of time. The city streets, the faces of strangers, the buzz of passing cars, it all blurred together. I was numb, disconnected from everything around me, yet still haunted by the images of Clara's face, her words echoing in my head. Eventually, I found myself at a small cafe, one of those places that's open late for people who just need somewhere to be. I wasn't hungry, I wasn't thirsty, I just needed a place to think, to breathe, to process what had happened. I ordered a coffee, black, and sat by the window, staring out at the city that now felt foreign to me. I couldn't escape it. I kept replaying the moment in my mind, trying to find some clue, some sign I had missed. Could I have done something differently? Was I blind to the distance between us? I thought about the times Clara had been distracted, the late nights she claimed were work-related, the nights she came home smelling like someone else's cologne. But I pushed all of that out of my mind. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking, that it wasn't important. But now it was all too clear. My phone buzzed on the table, jolting me from my thoughts. I picked it up, expecting another text from Clara, perhaps more words that would break me further. But this time, it wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize. A tight knot formed in my stomach as I answered the call. Hello. There was a pause before the voice on the other end spoke, and when it did, I could barely recognize it. Is this Jake? The voice asked. Yeah. Who's this? I replied, my throat dry, still feeling the heaviness of Clara's confession hanging over me. This is Michael, the man said, his voice calm but direct. Clara's boyfriend. I froze. The word boyfriend echoed in my mind, and my hands began to tremble. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. You're the one she's been seeing? I managed to croak, my voice barely audible. There was a moment of silence. Then Michael sighed. Look, I don't want to make this harder than it already is, but I think you deserve to know the truth. She's been lying to both of us. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but it's the right thing to do. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I couldn't process what was happening. She had been seeing him, while still with me, while pretending everything was fine. All those times I thought I was just being paranoid, they were true. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. A few months, he answered bluntly. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. It just did. But Clara told me about you, about how she felt trapped. I don't know what happened between you two, but it's clear she's moved on. And I think you need to hear that from me, not her. I felt like I was suffocating. How could she do this? How could she go behind my back like this, knowing that I trusted her completely? I had no words, just a bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. So what now? I asked, the words coming out more as a demand than a question. Michael didn't hesitate. Look, I'm not here to fight with you. I just want to be clear. Clara's made her choice. I think you need to hear it from her, not me. But she's with me now. I don't want to get into details, but you deserve to know. She doesn't love you anymore. It felt like the ground had just been ripped from under me. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or just hang up and walk away from everything. I had no control over what was happening anymore. I was left with one thought. I needed answers from Clara, not from him. She owed me that much. Thanks for telling me, I muttered, and before he could say another word, I hung up. My mind was spinning, and the cafe around me felt suffocating. I had to leave. I couldn't stay there, not with the weight of Michael's words still ringing in my ears. I paid for my coffee and walked out into the night, my footsteps echoing in the empty streets. I needed to confront Clara. No more waiting. No more running. I had to know the truth. I had to hear it from her. And as I walked, I felt a single, icy thought settle in my mind. My life would never be the same again. I walked for what felt like hours. The streets were quieter now, the only sound being the rhythmic crunch of my shoes against the pavement. The cold wind bit at my face, but I didn't feel it. I was numb. All I could think about was the call with Michael. The fact that Clara, the woman I thought I knew, had been living a double life. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been nothing but a fool, blind to everything happening right under my nose. By the time I reached our apartment building, my mind was a blur. My thoughts were chaotic, twisted with anger and hurt. I didn't know what I was going to say to her, but I knew I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't just let her walk away from everything we had without an explanation. I walked up the stairs to our apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. The door was slightly ajar, as it often was when Clara was home. She never liked to lock it, a habit I had always found endearing. Tonight, it felt like an invitation to face the truth. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the soft glow of the kitchen lamp. Clara was sitting at the table, just like before, but this time she wasn't eating. She was staring at the floor, her hands folded in her lap. The sight of her made my stomach churn. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was stand there, frozen in place. Clara, I finally said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. She looked up, and for a brief moment, our eyes met. I could see the guilt in hers, but it was too little, too late. She had already made her decision. Jake, she began, but her voice trailed off. I stepped closer to her, my breath coming out in sharp, uneven gasps. How long? I asked, my voice cold. as if I were trying to distance myself from the pain. How long has this been going on? Clara bit her lip, looking away. A few months, she said quietly, almost apologetically, but the words did nothing to soften the blow. I felt my chest tighten. A few months? A few months, and all this time, she had been lying to me? I had been living in a house with a stranger. I had a feeling, I whispered, more to myself than to her. I just didn't want to believe it. Jake, please, Clara said, standing up from the table. I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen. It just did. I didn't know how to tell you. How could you not know? I shot back, my voice rising, the anger finally breaking through the numbness. How could you not know that I would find out? That I would feel this? I motioned between us, the space that had grown so vast, so impassable. She flinched at the sharpness of my words, but I didn't care. I needed her to understand the depth of the betrayal, the weight of the lie. I didn't want to lose you, Clara said, her voice cracking. But I didn't want to keep pretending, either. I thought maybe I could live with both. But it wasn't fair to either of us. I shook my head, the rage building with every word she spoke. You didn't think I would find out? You didn't think I would feel the distance between us? You didn't think about me at all, did you? I did, she whispered, stepping closer to me. But it's too late now. I can't change what's happened. I stood there, staring at her, my heart in my throat. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to hold her, and tell her everything would be okay. But I knew that wasn't possible anymore. There was no going back. I turned away from her, unable to stand the sight of her anymore. I can't do this, I muttered, my voice barely audible. Jake, please, Clara begged, her voice desperate now. Please don't leave me like this. I never wanted to hurt you. But I was already walking out the door, the sound of her pleading fading behind me. I didn't care anymore. I had to get away. I had to leave her, leave everything behind. I walked down the hall, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty space. It felt like I was walking through a dream, like nothing was real. But one thing was, the pain, the betrayal. It was real, and it was eating me alive. I stepped out into the night, not knowing where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay. Not with her. Not with the woman who had just ripped my world apart with one single sentence. And as I walked away, I felt like I was leaving behind not just Clara, but a piece of myself. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of walking back into that apartment, the place where so many memories with Clara had been made, was unbearable. I ended up walking through the city streets, aimlessly, with no particular destination in mind. My mind was a whirlwind, each thought clashing with the next. How had I missed all the signs? Was I so blind to everything happening around me? I found myself near the old park we used to visit, a place we'd go to talk for hours, sitting on the same bench, wrapped in each other's arms, making promises about the future. I sat down on that same bench, not because I wanted to remember, but because I didn't know where else to go. It wasn't until I felt the sting of a cold tear on my cheek that I realized I had been crying. It wasn't just a few tears. It was like the floodgates had opened, and I couldn't stop it. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being able to handle anything that came my way. But this broke me. The betrayal felt like a weight in my chest, heavy and suffocating. I had given Clara everything. My trust, my love, my heart. And she had shattered it all without a second thought. I couldn't wrap my head around it. She had been with someone else for months, and I had never known. I had been so blind to her lies, to the way she had changed, so much so that I didn't even recognize her anymore. I pulled out my phone, half hoping that somehow there would be a message from her, something that would make this all make sense, something that would make me believe this wasn't happening. But there was nothing. Only a few missed calls from her, some texts that didn't mean anything anymore. I stared at the screen for a while, willing it to change, to give me something that would make this easier to understand. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay there, hoping for answers that would never come. So, I stood up, wiped my eyes, and walked away. The night felt colder now, the air sharper. The city that used to feel like home now felt like a foreign place. I felt alone in a way I had never felt before, as though I had been stripped of everything I had once known. I didn't go to my apartment. I didn't want to see her things, to smell her perfume lingering in the hallway. I couldn't handle it. Instead, I drove, aimlessly, without a destination in mind. The roads blurred by the tears in my eyes, The music in my car, just background noise to the storm of emotions raging inside me. I ended up at a small bar on the outskirts of town, one I had been to once or twice when I just needed to get away. It was quiet, the kind of place where people came to drown their sorrows in solitude. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and stared into the glass. I wasn't looking for comfort, wasn't looking for anyone to tell me everything would be okay. There was no fixing this. There was no way to undo the damage that had been done. All I could do was drink. And for the first time in years, I didn't care about the consequences. I needed something to numb the pain, to make the world stop spinning, even for just a moment. But the more I drank, the worse it got. The more the alcohol numbed the sharp edges of the pain, the clearer the truth became. She didn't love me anymore. She had moved on, and I was left in the ruins of what we had built together. I didn't know how much time had passed. Hours? A few minutes? It didn't matter. All I could do was sit there, alone in the dim light of the bar, with nothing but the echo of Clara's words in my mind. I'm in love with someone else. The pain of those words cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. The woman I had given my heart to, the one I had trusted with everything, had chosen someone else. And all I could do was sit there and drink away the emptiness inside me. By the time I left the bar, the sun was starting to rise. The world felt new, but I didn't feel any better. The hurt hadn't gone away. It was still there, buried deep inside, and it felt like it was going to consume me whole. I needed to face it. I needed to confront the truth, not hide from it any longer. But I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant. What was I supposed to do now? How do you pick up the pieces of a shattered life? I walked back to my car, my mind still racing. I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing. I had to find a way to move forward, even if it meant facing the hardest truth of all. That Clara, the woman I loved, was gone, and I had to learn how to live without her. The apartment was empty when I got back. I had barely slept, and the exhaustion was starting to catch up with me. But I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to close my eyes and drift into a world where things could be different. The truth was too raw, too real. It was morning now, the sun peeking through the blinds, casting a dull light across the living room. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where Clara's things used to be. The small trinkets she kept on the shelf, her books scattered around the apartment. All the little things that once made this place feel like home were now reminders of what I had lost. I had been hoping for some sign, some message, that would make me understand this betrayal. But the silence was all I got. No calls, no texts, no explanation, nothing. And just as I was about to stand up and leave, the sound of a knock on the door caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't in the mood for company, especially not today. But there was a strange, unexplainable pull that made me get up and answer it anyway. When I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. Standing in front of me was Clara. She looked different. Her face was pale, her eyes red, like she hadn't slept either. She looked vulnerable, a side of her I hadn't seen in years. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt, but it was gone before I could process it. "Jake, I need to talk to you," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know what to say. The anger I felt from last night was still there, burning in my chest, but there was something else too, a strange feeling I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, or maybe it was because I was just so damn tired of feeling broken. But I stepped aside and let her in. We didn't sit down. She stayed by the door, her hands clasped together in front of her. Neither of us spoke for a long moment, just standing there, two people who had once shared everything but now stood on opposite sides of a chasm neither could cross. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said, her voice shaky. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I don't know what happened. Things just changed." I didn't respond. I couldn't. How do you respond to someone who's been living a lie? Someone who's told you they loved you for years and then turned around and betrayed you? Words felt useless. She continued, her eyes darting to the floor, unable to meet mine. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I thought if I kept pretending, maybe everything would go back to normal, but it didn't. It just got worse. I could feel the anger rising again. She was trying to justify it. She was trying to explain away the hurt, the betrayal. And I couldn't stand it. "You think it's that simple?" I finally asked, my voice low and tight. "You think you can just come in here, tell me you're sorry, and everything's going to be okay?" She flinched, her shoulders tensing at the sharpness of my words. "I don't expect everything to be okay, Jake, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I don't deserve another chance. But I needed to tell you this in person. I didn't want you to think I didn't care. I could barely look at her anymore. I had loved this woman. I had trusted her with everything. And now, standing in front of me, she seemed like a stranger. I don't know what to say, I said quietly, shaking my head. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. I understand, she said, her voice soft, barely audible. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on both of us. I wanted to yell at her, to demand answers, to make her understand the pain she had caused. But part of me just wanted to walk away and never look back. I should go, Clara said after a long moment. She turned toward the door, her movements slow, almost reluctant. Before she could leave, I stopped her. Clara, I said, my voice shaking slightly. She turned back to face me, her eyes wide, waiting for me to say something, anything. But I didn't know what to say. All I could do was stand there, feeling everything unravel in front of me. And just like that, she walked out. I stood in the doorway, watching her disappear down the hallway. I felt like I was losing grip on everything, like I was watching my life slip through my fingers. As the door clicked shut behind me, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The door clicked softly behind her, and I stood there, frozen. The weight of the moment was suffocating. My heart, still raw from the previous night, beat loudly in my chest, but my mind was a mess of swirling thoughts. What had just happened? Was that closure, or was it another lie wrapped in a half-hearted apology? I couldn't move. I couldn't think straight. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the empty space where Clara had stood just moments before. Was I supposed to feel relieved? Was I supposed to feel something other than this crushing emptiness? She had come, apologized, and left. But nothing changed. She still loved someone else, and I was still left trying to pick up the pieces of a life I thought I understood. I walked to the couch, the place where we'd shared so many evenings together, talking about our dreams and our future. Now it felt alien. Everything felt alien. The apartment, the furniture, the space itself. It all felt like a reminder of everything that had slipped away. I thought about Clara. Her face, her words, the way she had looked at me. She seemed so vulnerable, almost pleading. She hadn't begged for forgiveness, but there was something in her eyes that told me she was just as lost as I was. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. I needed to know more, needed to understand what had pushed her to this. I couldn't just let it go. The questions kept bubbling to the surface. How did she meet him? Was I really that easy to replace? What was so wrong with us that she could fall out of love so quickly? My phone buzzed, cutting through the fog of my thoughts. A message from Clara. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted to read it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the text, bracing myself for whatever words she had left for me. Jake, I'm so sorry. I'll always care about you, but I think we both need to move on. I'll always remember the good times. That was it. No explanation. No answer to the questions that were eating me alive. Just a cold, final statement. Move on. As if it were that simple. I stared at the screen, the words burning into me. I could feel the tears threatening to fall, but I held them back. I wasn't going to cry for her. Not anymore. I wanted to respond, to ask her what the hell she meant by that. But instead, I locked my phone and threw it on the couch. The last thing I needed right now was more empty words. For the first time since the night she confessed, I felt a shift inside me. I wasn't sure what it was. Maybe it was the anger finally catching up with me. Or maybe it was the exhaustion of trying to understand something that wasn't meant to be understood. But whatever it was, it felt like something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to chase her anymore. I wasn't going to beg for answers that didn't exist. She had made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. I stood up and walked to the door, the weight of everything still pressing down on me. But as I stepped outside, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in the past. It was time to move forward, no matter how much it hurt. The questions would always linger. The pain would always be there. But I had to move on. For myself. For my own sanity. And maybe, just maybe, one day, I'd understand why everything had fallen apart. But for now, I had to let it go. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The silence was deafening, but it was the kind of silence I needed to heal. I didn't rush back into my old life. I didn't pretend like everything was fine. I gave myself permission to feel, to grieve, and most importantly, to take time for myself. I spent the first few days sorting through my thoughts, trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had become my life. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to pick up the phone and call Clara to ask her why, to understand what had really gone wrong. But every time I reached for my phone, I reminded myself that I couldn't keep clinging to the past. The answers would never come. And even if they did, it wouldn't change the fact that I had to move forward. I focused on the things I had neglected for too long. I started running again, something I used to do to clear my head. The simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, feeling the burn in my legs, helped me find a little peace. I reconnected with old friends, people who had been there for me long before Clara ever came into my life. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that life went on, even when it felt impossible. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I was sitting at a coffee shop when I ran into an old friend from work, Emily. We had known each other for years, but we had lost touch after I got so wrapped up in my relationship with Clara. We started talking, and for the first time in a long while, I actually felt something other than sadness. Emily didn't know everything that had happened, but she listened when I talked about the pain and the process of moving on. She didn't offer advice or try to fix me. She simply sat there, sharing a cup of coffee with me, offering me a sense of normalcy. As we chatted, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had grown. I had learned that, even in the deepest moments of heartbreak, there was always a way forward. It might not be easy, but it was possible. Over time, I began to feel more like myself again. The weight that had been crushing me slowly lifted, and I found that I could smile again, even if it was just a little. I had let go of the anger and the bitterness, and in its place was a quiet sense of hope. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that it would be mine to shape. One evening, as I was finishing up a run, I stood at the top of a small hill, looking out at the city below. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, the kind of sunset that felt like the world was offering a second chance. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. I had been through a storm, yes, but I had weathered it, and I knew that no matter what came next, I was strong enough to face it. I wasn't the man I had been when Clara first told me the truth. I was different now, and in that difference, I found something beautiful, the chance to start fresh, to create a new chapter in my life, one where I would find joy again, not because of someone else, but because of me. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. Because now, I was ready to live. And that was all that mattered.